Hey, no doubt about it. Annie Constable, I don't know why that surprises me, put this article out. WNBA could be weeks away from delaying season. And this second line, this subtitle, is very strange to me. Despite releasing the schedule earlier this week, the WNBA likely needs to agree to a CBA by February to start the season on time. How come that doesn't say the Players Union would likely have...
Recent reporting from Amy Costable suggests the collective bargaining agreement must reach completion by February to avoid pushing back the WNBA's planned launch date. This assertion faces scrutiny from certain quarters, particularly the subtitle accompanying the piece. The coverage appears to follow a pattern increasingly common in sports journalism, presenting labor negotiations through a lens heavily favoring player interests. Media outlets covering these CBA discussions have demonstrated remarkable consistency in advancing narratives sympathetic to the Players Association. This tendency has become unmistakable throughout the negotiation process. Costable's headline declares WNBA could be weeks away from delaying season, which raises immediate questions about framing.
How come that doesn't say the Players Union would likely have to agree with the CBA that's on the table from the owners? They've got a CBA on the table. Well, the players countered it. Okay, the owners didn't acknowledge it. It tells you all you need to know. The owners are not signing that CBA. They've already come out and said, hey, we're going to lose $700 million with what they're proposing. They're not going to do it. So
The subtitle proves especially peculiar, stating that despite the schedule's recent release, the league probably requires CBA agreement by February to maintain its intended timeline. An alternative framing might ask why the Players Association hasn't accepted the current proposal sitting before them. Management has already presented terms to the table. The players countered with their own demands, which ownership subsequently declined to acknowledge, a telling response revealing everything necessary about the proposal's viability. League executives have publicly stated the players' current demands would generate approximately $700 million in losses. Under those economic realities, ownership clearly won't proceed with ratification.
What they're proposing, they're not going to do it. So I would say that is off the table. We've also got Asia Wilson posting something that's kind of interesting because it gives you the sense that the players, the cracks in the foundation of the Players Union and what's going on is starting to show up. We talked about this the other day. We know one thing. I believe there's only right around...
That particular proposal appears effectively dead. Meanwhile, Asia Wilson posted something revealing on social media that suggests potential fractures developing within the Players Association's unified front. Recent discussions have touched on this emerging dynamic. Consider the mathematics of player representation. Unrivaled currently features roughly 60 participants. What about the remaining roster players across the league who aren't participating in that alternative competition?
I believe there's only right around, let's just say rough estimate, 60 players in Unrivaled. What happens with all the other players that didn't play in that league? That's the players that are going to want the new CBA to be signed. Probably the deal that's on the table. Again, something we've talked about in the last few days. I think you're heading down a road where you may see players, the infighting is going to start happening.
Those athletes likely desire immediate CBA completion, potentially accepting whatever terms currently exist on the negotiating table. Previous coverage highlighted how this scenario might unfold. Internal conflicts among union membership appear increasingly probable. Rotation players sitting 5th, 6th, or 7th in their team's depth charts will eventually check their calendars and recognize their financial needs. These athletes may conclude accepting present terms makes practical sense, acknowledging the possibility of reopening negotiations 3 years forward while securing immediate compensation. League officials continue promoting May 8th as the campaign's opening date.
Happening. All right, the players that are 5, 6, 7 on down in the rotation are going to be looking at their watches and they're like, I'm going to take this money that's on the table. We can come back at a later date, 3 years down the line, and relook at this thing. But I need to get paid. The WNBA.
This projection accompanied the 44-game schedule announcement, with statements explaining the release would facilitate essential planning processes. However, the actual status of collective bargaining negotiations tells a contradictory story. By Friday's close, the Players Association remained awaiting league response to a comprehensive proposal submitted nearly 30 days earlier. Multiple sources confirmed to Front Office Sports certain key details. Notably, ownership never acknowledged this proposal, which speaks volumes about its reception. The association's demands include capturing 30% of gross revenue alongside implementing a $10.5 million salary cap.
Get paid. The WNBA wants everyone to believe the 2026 season will tip off May 8th. It asserted it as much with an announcement of a 44-game slate and a statement that explained in part that it was to allow, quote, essential planning to begin. The reality of where the collective bargaining agreement negotiation stands paints a different picture. As of Friday, the Players Union was still waiting on a response from the league to a proposal it sent nearly a month ago.
These terms face fundamental obstacles toward acceptance. Management's most recent offer includes a maximum base salary reaching $1 million, potentially climbing beyond $1.3 million when incorporating revenue-sharing components. The league has proposed distributing roughly 70% of net revenue throughout the agreement's duration. What reports frequently omit is how that maximum figure escalates significantly by the CBA's conclusion, approaching nearly $2 million. This represents ownership's current standing offer. The proposed framework includes built-in salary escalation as the agreement advances.
Multiple sources told Front Office Sports. Well, they didn't acknowledge it. So what do you think that means? In that proposal, the union is seeking 30% of the share of the gross revenue and a salary cap of $10.5 million. Not going to happen. The league's last proposal includes a max base salary of $1 million, which would increase to more than $1.3 million with revenue share. The league is proposing sharing roughly 70% of the net revenue over the span of the deal.
Minimums, averages, and maximum contracts would all increase throughout the CBA's lifespan. Essentially, ownership seeks implementing mechanisms, allowing player compensation growth while simultaneously evaluating how their business performs under new media rights arrangements and evolving commercial landscape. Initial salary cap proposals position the ceiling at $5 million for year one, designed to expand proportionally with league revenue growth thereafter. The Players Association declined commenting on the schedule's release, though numerous athletes voiced reactions through social media platforms. Four-time MVP Wilson shared a clip from the television program Reasonable Doubt, captioning it "Me looking at the schedule release." The scene depicts a character stating, "Somebody better start talking right now before I start screaming." Wilson's selection of this particular moment raises interesting questions about her intended target. Is frustration directed toward league management or toward union leadership? Sophie Cunningham recently indicated that communication from union representatives has been sporadic, consisting of fragmented emails and scattered conversation snippets.
The league is proposing sharing roughly 70% of the net revenue over the span of the deal. Yeah, but what they're not telling you here is by the end of this CBA proposal, that max number goes up to nearly $2 million. And that's on the table from the league. So as the CBA progresses, that max number, along with all the other salaries, your minimums, your averages, all of that would go up as the CBA progresses.
The situation suggests players aren't receiving comprehensive updates about negotiation progress. Everyone appears operating with incomplete information. The article proceeds, discussing how the schedule features an immediate finals rematch to launch the season. Strangely absent from this scheduling coverage is any mention of the Indiana Fever facing the Dallas Wings, specifically Caitlin Clark versus Paige Buchers, a marquee matchup that went unmentioned in the reporting. That omission seems remarkable
as being a reason why these fans can't watch basketball. So yes, these basketball fans will be kind of not completely turning against it. Like, anyone who thinks he's a bad person's a dumbass, but like, at the end of the day, like, people will start to turn a little bit against her. So anyway, sorry, I'm in my building site right now. It is freezing cold, and we are leaning in with a wired headphone to a computer way away, which is about to, as you can see, it's about to be dragged out. My wires are only so long. My main headphones are in my parents' where I'm living at the minute. But let's take a listen.
I never understood a hater.
Legitimate concerns exist about whether the league can realistically launch in May, alongside questions about the 44-game format itself. Understanding exists that schedule expansion won't happen this particular season due to World Cup commitments. The Players Association proposed completely removing certain designation restrictions, though management hasn't shown willingness to engage with that suggestion. Discussion then shifts toward free agency logistics and the expansion draft process. Sources consistently indicate early March represents the optimal scenario for free agency's commencement, contingent upon CBA finalization by early February. This arrangement would allocate February's remaining weeks for organizing and executing expansion draft procedures.
I never understood a hater.
Okay, I cannot hear that.
Me personally. What?
Okay, I still cannot hear that. That is not ideal. That is not ideal. I'm trying to change up my my sound settings, and unfortunately, maybe.
What is your...
From the league's perspective, preparations continue assuming normal business operations. This raises questions about organizational readiness. Do these franchises and their leadership actually have protection lists prepared? Presumably they do, otherwise they'd be demonstrating gross irresponsibility. Every team's management should have completed mock scenarios identifying which players they'll shield during expansion and which free agents they'll pursue. These preparations should exist immediately, ready for deployment should an agreement materialize today.
Maybe?
What is your go-to...
No, so we are going to be just listening to this, and I'm going to be reading the captions.
I never understood a hater.
And we are also going to be lowering it a little bit, because it's a lot louder now.
Me personally. What is your go-to method for blocking out any hater shape that come in any form or fashion?
I've honestly never really had a problem with that.
Never really had a problem,
I don't
just
have a lot of good advice. It just has never bothered me because one, like, and this comes from Courtney, your favorite, the internet is not a real...
Under standard operating procedures, free agency launches in early January with major signings typically finalized by early February. Transposing that traditional framework onto present circumstances suggests an early March beginning would furnish adequate time for roster construction before training facilities open, April 19th. However, front office personnel would simultaneously juggle free agency responsibilities while preparing for the 2026 WNBA draft scheduled for April 30th. Both negotiating parties have stressed dedication toward ensuring the league's 30th anniversary season proceeds as intended. The challenge now falls squarely on the players. Should a strike materialize preventing the season's commencement, public blame will land directly on the Players Association.
place.
Yeah, I actually do. I agree and I disagree with the internet is not a real place. The internet, basically, it's when you would do something, if you were a public figure, people always talked about it, but now those conversations are getting amplified. So to say the internet isn't a real place isn't correct, but to say the internet shouldn't have any impact on your real life, yes, absolutely factually correct. Just like back in the day.
Fan sentiment has shifted considerably. While perhaps 20% of the traditional WNBA audience maintains positions like compensate them equivalent to NBA standards, that demographic still exists. These supporters appear disconnected from economic realities, imagining conspiracies where ownership conceals financial resources. Their perspective ignores fundamental business mathematics. Nonetheless, the crucial point stands. Pressure has intensified dramatically on the players. Supporters now possess clear awareness regarding proposals under consideration and what ownership has offered.
Back in the day, let's just say if there's no internet, people still would have been talking amongst themselves. Those conversations were irrelevant, as is talk on the internet, for being completely real.
And I believe that. Like, these are people I don't know talking about me who they don't know. Like, they have no idea the time, effort, like what has gone in to anything. They see me for whatever it is on the court. And I love interacting with fans. It's not a lot of people that are like that. But the ones who are, is like, that is such a reflection on you way more than.
The schedule's publication generated substantial excitement. Fans immediately began highlighting games generating personal interest and anticipation. If the players reject available CBA terms and either the entire season evaporates or even 3 contests get lost, the consequences for the league would prove catastrophic. The damage would be substantial because considerable portions of the audience already teetered on abandonment following controversies surrounding Caitlin Clark's injury situation last season. That's the assessment of where negotiations currently stand. The Players Association faces mounting pressure as public awareness grows and fan enthusiasm builds around the published schedule.
Reflection on you way more than it is on me. And so I feel like I'm just secure in who I am as a person, like my work ethic, my intentions for everything. Like I do everything really intentionally. And so I know that I know, like I said, I know what I'm putting out there. So if you're going to hate on that, I'm like, I can't help you. That's your problem.
I mean, probably as good a way to respond to hate as anything. And if we're being real, like, do you want to know the actual response to all the kind of hate towards?
Internal divisions may emerge as rotation players recognize economic realities and desire immediate resolution, potentially creating friction with stars who can afford prolonged negotiations. The coming weeks will reveal whether these dynamics force compromise or whether the league faces its first significant work stoppage in this new era of expanded attention and commercial opportunity. Napheesa Collier faced questions regarding Unrivaled and her perspective on handling criticism. Before examining her actual statements, initial reactions suggested that if Collier simply discussed avoiding internet influence on personal decisions, such conclusions would represent obvious wisdom any reasonable individual should reach naturally. However, uncertainty existed about her specific messaging approach.
The actual response to all the kind of hate towards Fee for what she said is, she hasn't said we know how to run a sustainable business again. She hasn't made that statement again. Like, I think anyone involved will tell you that given the circumstances and given everything, that was not the smartest thing to say. Like, it was not the smartest sentence to say. If nothing else, like, it was not the smartest sentence to say when she said it, especially because people could point to the numbers going down for Unrivaled. And to be honest, like, people are
Collier's public communication history demonstrates a pattern where statements sometimes emerge without apparent consideration for broader implications. The fundamental issue centers on fan perception. The majority of supporters primarily desire watching her compete athletically. However, recent statements positioned her as seemingly responsible for limiting fan access to basketball content. Consequently, basketball enthusiasts have begun shifting attitudes toward her, though not suggesting she represents a malicious individual or lacks intelligence.
Going down for Unrivaled. And to be honest, like, people are like, oh, she's sharing the revenue numbers going up. I'm like, yeah, she's the owner of the league. Of course she is. At the end of the day, the sponsors are coming back because this is almost a bubble. Like, women's sports is a bubble, and they don't want to, right now, they feel like they've invested. They're willing, basically, their sponsors are gambling the money. TV deals, it's gambling money right now on a bubble that is going to succeed, but Unrivaled probably won't. So the reality is, after a 3-year deal, Unrivaled's not going to get picked up. The WNBA is going to be bigger than ever. And
nevertheless, sentiment has started turning somewhat negative. Audio-technical difficulties initially prevented proper review of Collier's comments, requiring reliance on captioned text instead. The discussion centered on managing criticism from detractors regardless of format or source. Collier acknowledged